look at that. We pulled it off.
Nailed it.
Well
Nice.
done, well
Look at that.
done.
We're in the right order.
Yeah, all right. Victory in the very beginning. I like it. So if you're in the sound of my voice, come on over to the main stage. We're gonna have a great fun conversation here. So welcome everybody who's here in Massachusetts, everybody who's logging in from online. Thank you very much. It's been a great session. We've had lots of conversations on tips, tricks, behind the scenes, talking about materials, software, best practices. We want to kind of change up the tempo a tiny bit and have a conversation about your careers and talk a little bit about how do we utilize all the stuff that we've been discussing and learning to bring it back home, bring it back to our companies, and try to help increase the overall adoption of 3D printing. And I'm joined by some really, really great people here. So I've got Kat from Peloton. Thank you very much. I've got Ago. You guys saw him earlier today for Radio Flyer. And Patrick from Hasbro. So let me just start this off real quickly. And I'm going to start with you, Kat, just because you're kind of closer here. So you've done a whole lot with women in 3D printing. And we had some earlier conversations before we even sat down to have this. One of the things I really liked about your approach is you kind of take a devil's advocate approach to bringing additive manufacturing into your business sectors. Can I introduce a little bit about kind of what you do and kind of how you got into additive inside Peloton?
Absolutely. So my background is in fine arts, specifically sculpture. And I find that the most powerful thing about learning, working with your hands, working in 3D, is understanding how materials crumble, how they build, and all that. And so how I got into additive was realizing that it's a form of sculpture, it's a form of craft, and Peloton is really supportive in a diverse skill set, and so being able to bring that skill to the prototype team there, I can help with product development and innovation in ways that maybe somebody with a more traditional background can't.
Okay. So what sort of traditional methodologies do you think you've run into the most often that you've been able to kind of replace with additive?
Well, there's the classic blue foam. Everyone loves the mess that it makes, and everyone loves carving it and melting it, but I think that that's a really valuable skill to still preserve, especially when you're trying to compare what additive can do in terms of just the difference in time spent crafting, time spent iterating, and being able to take things from idea to the next iteration. Blue foam is still really valuable because it teaches people to think in 3D, whereas CAD might trick people into feeling a little more comfortable.
Okay. Ago, you had mentioned, and one of the things I want to highlight here is coming from Radio Flyer, you're coming from a real incumbent company, right? A company that was founded back in 1917. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of status quo as far as a manufacturing process, and there's a lot of really big innovations you guys have done over the past couple of decades. But when we're talking about adopting additive as a new method of manufacturing, have you run into any sort of hurdles or stopgaps or kind of the ain't broke, don't fix it mentality?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our prototype shop is super capable. We have CNC, PolyJet, FDM in-house, and there was kind of an incumbent of, this is how we've done it, this is how we do it. And when I joined Radio Flyer, I was like, hey, there's some pain points here. Takes a little while if we're outsourcing SLS parts or SLA parts, and the cost is pretty high. These are really valuable technologies. So in that case, I put together a pitch to kind of sell those concepts in, both from a cost and a time standpoint, and that has really helped me overcome some of those maybe more traditional incumbent challenges, and that was really effective in my case.
What were some of the things that you felt you had to kind of bring to light with some of the executive teams or kind of like the champions in order to get them to kind of say, hey, this is worth us spending some time, some energy, some resources in?
It was really data-driven, so comparing the parts that we were getting out of the SLS or the SLA machines respectively against our production parts and the capabilities that they had. So it was Gardner Impact, it was printing parts and doing treadmill testing. It was all of our internal design requirements that we would put our injection molding parts through, putting the 3D printed parts through and saying like, hey, look at the stuff that we could be doing and saving us, tooling modifications later down the line or things like that.
That's awesome. Okay. And then, Patrick, just kind of picking on you for a little bit here. So if anybody doesn't know Patrick and what he's done over Hasbro, you had actually gotten our Impact Award a couple of years ago for your work on the Selfie series, which was kind of a mass customization project.
Yeah.
And I think coming from another side of this, right, you're coming from a company that is very heavily injection molded focused, wide range of components and parts and things along those lines. Can you kind of walk us through some of the journey of how did that Selfie series that you had worked on come to fruition? Was there an executive champion, or was it something that you guys came to them and said, hey, here's something we could possibly do? What was that journey kind of like?
Got it. Great question. So, much the same as Kat and Otto, people are always interested in what we do, 3D printing, and how we bring a product to life, right? And so one of the things I would always say is never shy away from tours. We always tour people, because if you can demystify what you do, then when you start explaining it in numbers, people start getting it. So a few years back, we used to make one-off figures for any executive that would come, so from Disney or another one of our partners. And so we do it the traditional way. It would take us a couple weeks maybe to make that figure. And so my manager at the time was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could do that and do it in real time so we could give it to them before they leave? And so we sort of set our sights on that. And so from that moment, then it became all of a sudden this, hey, how do we create this into a product or, for the masses? And sort of that's what kicked it off. And of course there, again, to kind of loop it back to the ROI, we had to sort of compete against what injection molding and sort of what our normal sort of mindset was for how we cost things out. And so comparing it to, instead of the initial huge investment that you have in a steel, sort of the time and the materials, right? And so we tried to automate as much as we could, work with certainly Formlabs to kind of get the cost of materials to a place, the automation to a point that it actually could compete against injection molding. It was actually cheaper in the end.
So it was actually cheaper to print it than to mold it?
Yep, exactly. So our parts were actually cheaper than the injection molded bodies that we were placing our sort of custom pieces on, and we were making one of ones. So.
And so just so I'm aware, so you're talking like taking the cost of the molds and the tooling and the machinery and the raw material and amortizing that down to the individual figure was less expensive, or was less expensive from just a raw material standpoint?
No, it was less expensive overall, yeah. So especially when you start looking at the numbers, right? Obviously if you're making $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, hard to compete against. When you start talking about 50,000 to 100,000, it's much more competitive, and the numbers worked in our favor.
Okay. And so in that scenario, it sounds like there was some executive kind of sponsorship of the initiative.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you guys run into situations where you feel like you've got to carry some of the front load, where you kind of have to go to a decision maker or an internal champion of some sort and kind of say, hey, here's a place that we could potentially consider using additive?
Yeah, I mean, in my case, it was that set of slide decks with the ROI of, these are our current material costs. This is the current lease payment on our existing printers. Going to Formlabs is this cost saving. This is the dollar value associated. So that's what that setting was with kind of the executives at Radio Flyer.
So for you, it was really much an ROI kind of conversation. It was
Absolutely.
dollars and cents?
Yes.
Okay. How easy is that for you guys to get and to kind of put together? Is it something that you find you have to do on a regular basis, or is it something that you had to get a little creative, get some assistance from the organization?
I like to document as I go. So for example, rather than looking forward and hypothetically putting together an ROI, I like to document what we've done. And I like to document, okay, this is how long it took to get this project done, and then you have some data to compare against when you do want to make that pitch. You do want to come with a story that not only makes sense for the narrative that you're trying to pitch to an executive or just even your own manager. You want to also come with data, hard facts, and scenarios that you've all witnessed, and be able to say, this could have been improved because I'm pitching this idea.
Okay. So, and we talked a tiny bit about this earlier, that I really believe that this is a new age in additive manufacturing. Over the last 3 years, we've kind of seen a reemergence of interest in it. There's been some new products in the FDM space and the commodities spaces, but it's become much more exciting for executives now and for just everybody in general. Materials are getting better. I mean, Formlabs, we just reduced cost on materials, releasing faster machines. If you guys had the ability to go to today and you had to start your kind of additive teams and additive departments over again, what would you do? Is there anything that you would change? Is there any initial, like for those who are joining us, especially from home and want to expand the additive environment in their organization, where's a good place to start?
Yeah, so I would look at it a little bit differently. So previously, years ago, the cost of entry into 3D printing was so expensive, right? Large format printers, you were in, and typically you were stuck with one resin that you loaded the machine with. And that was great for larger companies. If you were a smaller company, though, you just can't be that flexible, right? And so I think Formlabs has obviously taken down that barrier, and then the materials alone have kind of freed that up so that there is a right material for whatever project you're looking for, ease of swapping the materials, and then obviously the speed with the 4, right? And so for me, I think it would be much easier to justify these days starting small with a Formlabs printer. You don't need a lot of infrastructure to support that build. And then the usability, right? You don't need a ton of training. So you can, the ramp up and the startup is so, you have success right out of the bat.
I'd say that the only thing that I would really recommend, especially teams that are outfitting a shop for the first time, is to consult your experts first, because not every, even if it's the best tool in the market, not every tool is great for that team's projects or that team's intentions and goals. So asking your experts what they like to use to achieve the business goals will actually have better ROI and also just a stronger business impact.
Yeah, in addition to asking the experts, I think really leaning on your core users to understand what they need from the machine. So in my case, it was printing identical parts and saying, here's A, here's B, here's your kind of confidence building tool to kind of sell this machine or sell the value that this machine would bring to our space and to our workflow.
What's kind of your opinion if you're starting up an additive environment into what types of equipment to look into, right? There's a huge landscape, and you kind of mentioned there's some of those multi-$100,000 pieces of equipment. There's some consumer-grade pieces of equipment. There's a whole gamut of different technologies. How do you decide where to invest the time and money, the resources, the energy?
I mean, there's experts like you on sales teams for equipment manufacturers.
That wasn't a lead question, trust me.
That was good, though.
But there are people that aren't always just trying to sell you a product. They're also trying to match you to the best product, right? And so I say ask questions. I mean, I ask too many questions sometimes, and I just feel like you're never gonna find the answer you're looking for just by sitting around and like scratching your head. So ask questions, check out user groups, check out forums, and see how people are using something, and see what the support system is. Because sometimes if you get something that is really expensive and is very closed loop, you actually run out of support when you're looking for something specific.
I think that's really smart. And everyone's willing to help you out, right? If you ask the right questions, most companies are willing to make you a test part. They're willing to work with you. There's a lot of tech that I really like that we don't have in our department. Just because it's cool doesn't mean we need to implement it. So it has to make sense. So I think you're right. Doing your homework, asking questions is huge.
So let's, now that we've got a time period where there's a lot more of excitement adding into the additive space, we talked a little bit about some of the incumbent issues. There's another type of person that I run into, and I hear customers talk about this as a challenge all the time, so I'd like to get your opinion on it. And I kind of call it like the science fiction addict. It's the executive or the leadership person or a champion or whoever who comes in and says, oh, I saw this thing on the news, this person's 3D printing and insert some really high-end, very hyper-specific thing that would take forever to kind of get to. How would you guys approach those sorts of situations so you don't crush the dream, but still bring them back to reality?
So for us at Radio Flyer, one of one of the things we like to say a lot is we have a very yes I can mindset. So that's very likely something that we would use in this scenario where we'd say, sure, here's how we could do it. Here are the obstacles we might encounter or the costs associated, and really try and get buy-in from there on, is this something we should keep doing before kind of going full bore in, but basically do the homework, collect the data, say, yep, we can do it. This is how we would go about doing that. Go. If the answer is yes, then fantastic, we'll go for it. If not, maybe find alternative solutions to get there or get close to there creatively.
I think the alternative solutions is the key phrase there, because there are a lot of ways to do pretty much everything. And so if somebody's really excited about one way to do it, something that they saw, being able to demonstrate like, oh, we can achieve that with other tools or with other techniques, or even just showing that like you might not even need that thing, you just are looking for a certain goal or result out of that thing. So finding out what the core request is sometimes is enough.
Well, you had mentioned something to me earlier, and this is where I kind of appreciated your devil's advocate approach to these sort of situations, where there's times where you'll come back and honestly say, well, you could probably make it without it being additive. And you found some success in kind of saying, oh, but there are actually other methods to manufacture this same thing. It doesn't have to be additive, and not trying to square peg round hole yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love 3D printing. I love additive. It is, I'm known to all my friends as, that is what I do. That is what I think about.
You're the 3D printing girl?
I'm the 3D printing girl. and I love that. But I also love to manage expectations and say 3D printing is not magic. It will never be magic. It is a science. It is a very logical science. And if you want magic, say the words.
Talk to a wizard.
Yeah, say the word and we'll give you a part. But that doesn't mean it's going to be 3D printed. I'm going to give you what you asked for in the best way possible. It doesn't mean it's going to be 3D printed.
Do you guys find that sometimes that's also helpful, setting realistic expectations early on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you have to be realistic because, like I said before, one tool, one technology doesn't do everything, right? So you got to have the right technology, whether it's blue foam early on or whether it's additive manufacturing in a production setting, right? And so the one thing that I do like that has disrupted the space is if you think about it from early concept to production, now additive manufacturing fills that entire space. There is a technology, there is a way to get there. It's about choosing the right program and technology that fits your need, though, and not just jumping in because it's the latest thing someone saw on CNN,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the entire industry has been a really interesting one. We've had a lot of new impact, a lot of new people jumping in and trying to expand where they are. Have you guys found any specific ways to gain a champion inside your organization?
I like to demonstrate that 3D printing is both an educational tool, a team building tool, skill building, as well as morale boosting. I love it when people come and visit the 3D printing lab because they're always so fueled with passion, and then they take that passion back to their work. So, for example, at Peloton, someone from the studios or someone flying in from one of our remote offices could come into the lab for a tour and be really excited about 3D printing all of a sudden when they didn't even know that we had it. And being able to say, yeah, what does your team need? We would love to support you guys. It builds that fire and it builds that team structure and helps them do their work even if it's totally tangential to hardware at all.
Are you guys doing any sort of activities or promotions to get people to come to your setups and your labs?
Absolutely. It's part of every tour through the office. Anybody in any department, if they come through the office, we give them a tour of the prototype shop, talk about the printers. Even for events like Take Our Kids to Work Day, we're exploring opportunities to print little trinkets or kind of teach the kids about the printers, how they work, why we use them, how we use them, put on little educational mini sessions. So we've done things like that in the past, and that's been really engaging for the kids because you see that spark in their eye. When they get excited, but yes, we use it.
Kids alone, I enjoy getting to tour printing facilities. I get a little spark in my eye.
Yeah, we do the same thing. So we have everything from sort of elementary on up through college, through the department, and STEM. It's so important and it encourages people, and you can help point them in the right direction for a career path as well.
Do you do some of those events also with not just students but also coworkers?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Peloton hosts an internal hackathon, which is
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, which is a great, and I know a lot of companies do this, but what's really exciting for me to see is somebody who doesn't have a hardware background or doesn't work on any of the hardware. They have a hardware idea and they want to see it come to life. So they have that childlike spark when they're actually in marketing, and it it just brings everyone together and like really champions what we do as a company.
Yeah, at Formlabs, we have a hackathon that we do every year as well, and it's a really good occasion to have people intermix, and it's an opportunity to kind of stretch your understanding and your boundaries and what you think is possible, and it's a lot of fun, so I'm glad to hear you guys do that. Now, here's a question that we discuss a lot internally, and I'm kind of curious for your opinions on this. What do you think about using printers to do kind of knick-knack, trinket, toys, little giveaways, promo things, give them to the execs or something like that? What's your opinion on that versus using them only for dedicated production processes?
I think all three of us would say we do them, right? They're fun to make, right? And you can have fun, and you want to showcase what the department it can do, right? And so, they always seem to come at the wrong time sometimes, right? You're busy, you're flat out, and you're like, okay, yeah. But overall, it represents the department. When you walk somewhere and you see that on an executive's desk or somebody that did something and was recognized, and you're like, oh, yeah, we made that. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think similarly, we do the same thing. It's a vessel for the culture of the company. If it's a show of gratitude, we have our golden wagons or things that one flyer gives to another flyer. It's like, hey, thanks for doing this for me. I really appreciate it. So we have little internal mechanisms like that I think 3D printing serves an effective and reasonable use case for to really kind of lift everyone up and kind of act as a benefit to the culture.
It also supports our ERGs at Peloton too. The employee resource groups are a valuable part of our culture and our diverse support network. And so we have, advocates for 3D printing within those ERGs who, utilize the 3D printing that we use for work also to support that and celebrate the diversity of the company.
And you guys have found that you think that these sort of things, have they generated more interest into what you do? Do you give them to somebody and they kind of go, oh, wait, we did this here? I didn't even know we could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think that's kind of fun, right? A lot of people have said, oh, well, we've got to keep this a little more limited, but opening it up does generally create more interest, excitement. So it's definitely an interesting conversation piece about how do you utilize production equipment effectively. So one of the other questions that I really kind of want to know, if you had to start with one Formlabs material, that would be a good place to start in bringing a material or bringing additive to a company. And I didn't ask them this one ahead of time. They have no preparation at all on this guy. Where would you start?
My answer is easy. It's the SLS PA12. It's what we use. It works for our designers. It works for our engineers. Everyone loves it. Everyone's happy with it.
Not what I was expecting to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what we did. That's the first machine we brought on board. So.
Well, my follow-up question is, who's asking?
Ooh.
Is it a designer? Because then I'm going to say gray. Love gray. Specifically the Gray Pro, because it's got a little bit of both. But the engineers, I would say Tough 2000.
Okay.
Yeah, we're tough 1500, everyday resin.
Okay. We've got the Tough 1500, the 2000, and my personal favorite, Durable. I've actually even got it on my lanyard here. Are all back in the torture testing room, right? From the engineering standpoint. So I agree with all that. Though I like the nylon 12 answer. That's definitely an interesting take on it. So I guess as we're wrapping up here, I've got enough time for just one more question. If you had to start with one project at your organization that would be a good springboard, what would you kind of go back to your organizations or something you could recommend to everybody who's watching as start here? Here's a place to kind of use this buzzword or this location in the facility to try to start the additive journey. And I'll answer it for myself to start off here. So I come from a background of metrology, and one of the biggest hurdles has always been generating fixtures for things like CMM machines and measurement systems and stuff like that. there's an infinite array of geometries on parts and a limited way to hold them. And so I've always thought that's a great place to get started.
Well, for me, I used to teach STEM to kids, and one of my favorite things to get them involved was printing something that didn't need supports, because then it really teaches you about the physicality of whatever material you're using. So designing something and then designing your own supports for them was a great project to like learn from scratch.
Okay, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I think within our organization, it's really just again tying it back to that A/B testing, picking an existing product, saying, hey, here's an improvement we want to make. Here's a proposed design solution. Here's the original in the injection molded material. Here's the printed identical part, and then here's the improvement, and then really showing like, hey, we can do this work without the traditional approach we may have taken in the past.
So if I can concentrate that one down a little bit, it's kind of keep your eyes open for an opportunity to reinvent an older method of doing something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say breadboards, right? For us, we do a lot of iterative design. So, a nice thing about if you do a breadboard is you do that iterative design, people can see how quickly you can kind of go from, ooh, that didn't quite work. If I make this change and this change, I can print another one overnight or in a couple hours and then put that back together. And then everybody starts connecting the dots on, wow, all right, I see the advantage of that tech.
I'm going to have a longer conversation with you on that one. That's actually really interesting. All right, unfortunately, we are out of time. So it goes that quickly, but I did want to say thank you so much, Pat, Ago, Kat. Really appreciate it. You guys are just leading the way in additive. So thank you very much for joining us. Stick around. We got more to come.
Thank you.